god! I feel empty, completely desolate. Hey guys, my name is Alex and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This week I'm going to be reading A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. So for those of you who don't know, A Little Life is supposed to be like straight up traumatic and devastating. It is notorious for being like one of the saddest books ever written, and a lot of people refer to it just as like trauma porn, but it's a really well-known book, and I decided that naturally that this was something I wanted to read because like it's so infamous that I wanted to have an opinion on it. However, there were like two problems with this though. One, this book is a fatty. It is like 800 pages long. It's really long. And then the second problem is that this book is obviously supposed to make me really sad and just like uncomfortable, and it's kind of hard to like pencil that in for like, oh, for this week and a half, I'm just gonna like read a book that is gonna make me really sad and uncomfortable. But if you've watched any of my YouTube videos before, you've probably realized that this is not my room. That is because I have COVID right now and I am being quarantined. Yay! So now I'm isolated in this small like apartment-esque room, and I've got all this free time and I've got just this fat book staring at me. So I figured I would just start now. I really have like zero expectations going into this, so we will just see how it is. All right, let's start reading. So I just finished reading the first part, and these are my like initial impressions. Okay, so like I'm only 100 pages in, and I feel like I've got a good grasp on like 3 of the 4 main characters. Obviously, like I think Jude is supposed to be mysterious to us at this point. So for context, I don't read many books that are about self-harm or like have self-harm in them. And so like we're really just diving in on the deep end here. Within like the first 100 pages, there's like a small incident of like self-harm, and I'm sure it only gets much worse. But even when I was reading it, I was like, ooh, damn, this is kind of uncomfortable to read, because I feel like I just don't normally read stuff like this. Like I'm dreading how bad I know that this is going to get. That being said, on like just a literary level, I think the characters and I think the writing are just like really good. I don't know, like the dynamic between these 3 characters seem so real. Like I understand that they're fictional characters, but this seems like a genuine group of friends that you could kind of like imagine, right? Like the way they bounce off of each other, the way their interactions are, the way they've like come to like quietly understand how they can and cannot act around their friends, and even without like explicitly saying it, they've all reached this mutual understanding of each other. Like I think that's so genius. Part of me also doesn't want to like these characters because I know that it's just gonna end up horribly. Yeah, but we'll figure out what happens next. All right. It's currently 3:30 in the morning because it's daylight savings time, but I'm gonna try to knock out like another 70 pages before I go to sleep tonight. For no real reason other than I like kind of want to. God. Hey guys, I just wanted to make a quick reading update. It's been about 2-ish days. I'm on page 250 of the novel right now. Nothing too traumatic has happened. There's been like 1 or 2 scenes that has made me like slightly uncomfortable, but I feel like the first 250 pages are really just like, and I don't think this is a spoiler by any means, it insinuates a lot about the past, about Jude, but I think a lot of it is left for later in the book. But I think it spent a lot of time really fleshing out what the relationship dynamics are between Malcolm, Jude, JB, and Willem. Like in terms of character writing, I think that Hanya Yanagihara does such a good job of creating like really intricate and really believable characters. Like all of them feel so different, and I think that is such like a remarkable thing to do. And like they all have their own aspirations and they all have their own backstories, and you can tell how that feeds into like the person that they currently are. Harold and Julia are just goated. Love those people. So far it has not been like the absolute trauma fest that I've been anticipating, but like there have been hints at it, and I can tell that it's going to get much worse. So I tend to really enjoy character-based novels anyways. Like I think plot is fun, but ultimately I'm always there for like the characters, I feel like. And so honestly, I love what I've been reading so far. Like this feels like a really deep, intensive look into the lives of 4 kids who have known each other since college, and you're watching them grow up and become like full-fledged adults. And I just wanted to point out that there are so many passages in this novel that I think are so perfect. I was reading them and I just thought like this is such a perfect way to describe this feeling. 2 passages I remember really distinctly that I just remember being like, that is so beautifully written. Like, I understand exactly what this feels like. There is one moment where Jude is like sitting at Thanksgiving with him and a bunch of his friends, and Jude is just sitting there watching all of his friends talk to each other, laugh, and like, you know, do their normal character interactions that they always have with each other, start the same arguments that they always start, bicker and joke around in the same way that they always do. And he like feels no pressure to say anything. Like, he's able to just sit back and like relish in this moment that these people are in his life. And I feel like I have done that so many times, and I feel like I've never seen that really put onto page till I read this, and I was like, that is exactly how I feel. Like, that's so perfect. And then there's another moment where he just describes like moments of feeling deeply, deeply content with his friends, and like how he wishes time wouldn't move forward and how he could just sit in this moment of contentness and love forever. He ultimately realizes that as soon as he wishes that, the moment has already passed. And I thought that that was beautiful. And there's a bunch more passages in the book so far that I think are just really well written. I feel like this is like the calm before the storm type vibes, but I will continue reading. Okay. It's that time of night again where I subject myself to multiple hours of just sadness. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Okay, I'm on page 380-ish right now. Like, right now, it's really hard to read. I'm gonna be honest. I entered this book, my walls raised. I was prepared for these characters to go through absolute hell. What I was not prepared for was the first 350 pages, where you get such a deep look into these characters' lives. You naturally let down your guard a little bit. Good things happen to them. Unwittingly, I have let down my walls, and now I care about these characters. Like, right now, it's manageable. It's making me uncomfortable. I don't really want to keep reading. It only gets worse from here. I'm so convinced that it only gets worse. I have no words. I have so few words. God. I have no words. Just none. I feel empty. So it has been 2 days since I have finished reading A Little Life, and I am now in a place where I can talk about this book without feeling completely emotionally numb. So let me just start this with like the same trigger warning spiel that every A Little Life video has. If you are at all sensitive about pretty much anything traumatic, you should probably not read this book. There's a lot of really traumatic and intense stuff that happens in this book, so be very careful if you decide to read it. So I'm filming this 2 days after I finished reading the book, and I'm still writhing in pain. Like, the day that I finished reading A Little Life, I remember I finished it around 9:30. I legit sat in my chair and laid on my couch in just complete silence for like 20 minutes, just waiting for me like process the things that I had just read, cause like it all just hit so hard. I remember the next morning, I think I slept at like 2 or 3 that night, and I remember I woke up at 7 o'clock the next morning on accident, and like I just could not fall asleep again because I just couldn't stop thinking about Jude and the different characters in this book and the different type of stuff that they all have to go through, mainly Jude. Literally immediately after finishing the book, I texted my best friend, and I just felt like I really needed a hug or like some type of human interaction to remind me that the world was not just completely horrible. I read the entire book, and I think I teared up maybe once or twice, but I never like straight up cried. But I was constantly filled with this overwhelming sadness that just felt like a weight pressing down on my entire being. Like, reading this book, it just really makes you feel like life can be so horrible, and it is so horrible for so many people. And there's literally a line in this book that perfectly captures this feeling. He had looked at Jude then and had felt the same sensation he sometimes did when he really thought of Jude and what his life had been. A sadness, he might have called it. But it was a pitying sadness, a larger sadness, one that seemed to encompass all the poor, striving people, the billions he didn't know, all living their lives, a sadness that mingled with a wonder and awe in how hard humans everywhere tried to live, even when their days were so difficult, even when their circumstances were so wretched. Life is so sad, he would think in those moments. It's so sad, and yet we all do it. Like, it is as sad as everyone says it is. Review over. That's literally like the entire book in a nutshell. It is just a reminder of how sad and how horrible people's lives can be. So if that's something you're into, give it a read. And those are just like my visceral feelings and reactions after finishing the book. Now that it's been a couple days, I have so many thoughts about the book, and I think there are so many things that this book does so well. So let's start with the most common criticism I think this book gets, which is just that this book is just trauma porn. And I understand where that is coming from. Like, a lot of really bad things happen in this book. But I think the criticism and critique of just calling this book simple trauma porn is like a really shallow reading of what this book is. Because whenever I hear this book described as trauma porn, I feel like it is a slap in the face to the lives of people that are as bad as this. Part of the reason I think that the pain in this book feels so real is because for some people out there, it is real. Like the quote I just brought up, like, a lot of people have really horrible lives that we cannot even begin to imagine how bad and how full of suffering they are. And I think to just call this book like trauma porn is to really just disregard that fact. I have by no means experienced like a fraction of the pain that is in this book, but I think to acknowledge that it doesn't happen, that things like this don't happen to people, is just ridiculous. Like, the reason that this book hurts so much is because how real it feels. Like, if this book felt so outlandish and so contrived, I don't think that it would affect people. But it clearly does, and I think that has to do with how real these things seem. One of the characters has a really traumatic backstory. Like, reading the things that happened to him in his childhood are some of the most uncomfortable things that I've probably ever read, undoubtedly. But the repercussions of what happens to this character in his childhood and how they carry over to the rest of his life seems so real to me. Like, the repercussions just make so much sense. Like, the coping mechanisms that they used to survive when they were younger, the ways that they thought about the world that let them live through all of their suffering, carries on into their adulthood, and it affects the way that they currently see the world. It is not just like trauma for trauma's sake. It is trauma that is so intense and experienced at such a young age that it shapes the person who experiences it. And like, you can feel how authentic that trauma feels in the way that that character continues to carry himself for the rest of his life. But then as we grow older and our circumstances change, we can't just unlearn these coping mechanisms that are so integral to how we have survived the past. And I think that just is so beautifully done. A character who grows up thinking that they are unlovable and thus deserves like a lot of hardship and suffering doesn't just suddenly become convinced that the world is full of sunshine and rainbows and to just start readily accepting the love of others. And as a person who loves character-based novels, I cannot sing enough praise for how much I love the characters in this book, especially for a book that has no plot. Like, for a book that is 800 pages long and it literally has no real plot other than just the descriptions of what happens in people's lives, like, the fact that it has been able to garner so much like acclaim and so many people have read the entire thing, and I think this is a testament to a couple things. One, how immersive the characters in the world that she manages to create are, and two, how much she gets you to care about these characters and to be sucked into their lives and to want to become a part of their friend group. This kind of leads me to my next point, which is like, everyone talks about how sad this book is. This book is really sad. Like, the lows are incredibly low, but very rarely do people talk about like the good parts in this book. And I think I mentioned this while I was reading it. There are a lot of really heartwarming, loving moments in this book. Moments of true, genuine friendship, moments of real displays of love, moments where the characters that have been through really horrible things feel completely content and happy and like their lives are going really well. I don't think I expected that when I was coming in to read this book, because everyone just talks about how traumatic and horrible this book is. There are happy beats that allow us to take a breath and really soak in the happiness of the moment. And this is like actually one of my favorite things about the book, which is that like, I think a lot of the times when we read stories, we kind of expect it to come to like this fulfilling conclusion where all of the loose ends have been tied up and it's now in a state where we are content with it being like this for the rest of our lives. But this book refuses to do that. Like life, it ebbs and flows. Bad moments are followed by good moments, and those are followed by more bad moments, and it keeps going until the very end of the book. People suffer, people die abruptly, often without meaning, and there are very few times where we truly feel like all of the loose ends in our lives have been closed. The last major thing I wanted to talk about, because like, trust me, I could talk about this book for at least 2 or 3 hours, is like just the timeline. This is the first book that I've read that follows a group of people from when they're like in their college years to like when they are full-grown adults. And it is just really interesting watching these people grow up together and then also reminisce about the lives that they used to share together. Because like, it is making me realize that I am in college, that like the people I currently have in my life are the people that I'm going to know from college college. They're going to be the people that I have 30 years from now that I want to look back on and be like, oh my God, you remember when we did this in college? It like really put into perspective my own position in life. And I really appreciated that the book did that. And I understand that people at different parts of their lives will feel differently about that, but this is just how I felt reading it in college. Okay, cool. So those are my main thoughts. I give it a 5 out of 5. Would I recommend it to anyone? No, obviously, like there's a whole bunch of trigger warnings. You should definitely read those before you like read it. To anyone who thinks that they are in a place or are capable enough of reading it, I honestly think it is worth the read. I think it's a really interesting experience that I do not think I will get many more times through reading. And if anything, I think you should read it just to have a say in like the public discourse of this novel. So those are my thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed watching me suffer, and I hope I will see you guys next time.